Walaleo Dondel Dayo, thank you so much for attending. This is a really, really important community event happening now. We're having the Lobster Law vote and community presentation. So thank you so much for your dedication to the Lobster Law process these last few months and for making the time to be here with us tonight. Thank you to all of our viewers who have signed in online and to all of the voters who are choosing to vote and register online tonight as well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dawn Germain, and I am the Listuguj Comprehensive Community Planning Coordinator. And I have been collaborating with the LMG Fisheries Department on this really amazing project because it does highlight and embrace some of the key aspects of our Listuguj Mi'kmaq Community Plan. So not only through this act of creating and adopting and implementing through various stages a lobster law, we're embracing a lot of the Mi'kmaq laws and governance that we talked about in our plan, and a lot of the ways that we can sustain, manage, and take care of our natural resource, which is the lobster, our junkage. So I'm not gonna be really doing much speaking tonight, just kind of the introductory stuff and handling some of the question and answer. But tonight, it's mostly the fisheries show. So Denny, the fisheries manager, is gonna be providing you a presentation on the lobster law. There were lobster law documents printed for you at the front for you to review, and they're also available online for any of our online viewers. So just before we get started, I'll give you a quick idea of how the evening is gonna go. Usually we have a meal first, but in this case, we decided to do a presentation first with a question and answer period follow, and then around 6 o'clock, we're gonna have a delicious turkey dinner that was prepared for us by Twist of Heaven Catering. At that time, at 6 p.m., the online voting opens, and so does the in-person voting opens, and that will remain open until 9 p.m. tonight. Our wonderful ladies at the back are going to produce a count for us this evening, so hopefully around 10 o'clock we should have some results for you of the vote. If you're familiar with the building, you'll know that the washrooms are just down the hallway to my left, and there's a couple exits that you can use if you need to excuse yourself at any time during the presentation. But we would ask that you just put your cell phones on mute so that during the presentation you don't distract anyone, and it will especially help us with our online view. So to kick off the evening, I'm going to invite him, and he's going to give you guys a bit of an introduction and a welcoming and explain, how important the lobster file is to Listuguj and to Chief and Council.
Thank you. So thank you. It's very much an honor to be here speaking to you tonight about this culmination of nearly 3 years of work. You look in here, and I can remember early on in my first mandate just talking about how do we engage, how do we better hear from our community members, how do we build from the grassroots up, and I believe that's what we've done here. Over 800 acts of participation. Nearly 3 years of effort of listening and hearing and shaping up a law, shaping up a management plan that is very much in line with what our people are asking for. How our people want to manage our lobster, manage the resource. How do we want to maintain that relationship that we have with our lobster? And I think it's great that we're here tonight to approve this, or if we so choose, as a community. It's not the Chief and Council that are doing this, it's the community that's doing this. It's the community that's providing very much the direction to us as leadership and saying, this is what we want from you, this is what we expect of you. I think there's a lot of good work that's gone into this. I want to take this time to thank all of the people that worked on this, the fisheries staff. If we could give them a round of applause, that would be much appreciated. As well as thanking all of our community members that over the last nearly 3 years have contributed to this discussion, contributed to building our own Listuguj Mi'kmaq law on lobster. I think it's important. It's something that we've been doing for forever, creating our own laws, creating our own way of governing, and we continue to do so. And I think that's an important thing for us to maintain and to continue doing as Listuguj Mi'kmaq. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you everyone for participating. I hope you enjoy the wonderful meal and the presentation as well. Walaleo.
So we will begin with the presentation. We have scheduled a question and answer period for when the presentation concludes, and during question and answer we'll have Dr. Fred Metallic, who is the Director of Natural Resources, and Legal Counsel Zachary Davis, who is Legal Counsel for the LMG Natural Resources, but has been particularly working on this lobster file for the past 3 years. So you'll notice that there is a microphone located up at next to this front table. And we would ask that during the question and answer period, if you would please ask your question to the microphone. If you're unable to get up to the microphone, just let me know and I could bring the wireless mic over. But the point is we really want to make sure that our online audience can hear the question and the response as well. So we're just trying to accommodate for that. If there is something really pressing that you would like to ask during Denny's presentation, you can do so. But for the most part, I think the evening, especially with the online audience, would flow a little bit better if we kept our questions towards the end. So we have provided pens for you up at the front. If you guys wanted to make notes on those documents, you're completely, we encourage that. So does anybody have any questions on how the evening is going to flow? Okay, great. Without any further ado, I will hand the mic over to Denny Isaac. You will probably want to keep your lobster law fishing document handy, as he will be going through that as part of his presentation.
Good evening, everyone. So I'll be taking the presentation over from here on out. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming out to hear our presentation on the lobster law and for participating in the vote. Like Darcy said, it's been a 3-year process in the beginning, starting off with drafting our own interim lobster fishing plan for the community. And then from those engagements, it was clear that the community stated that, we want to govern and manage our own fisheries. And that is what led up into the basically creating our own lobster law, or establishing a framework and putting it to the community for comments, and then here today for a vote. So my presentation, I'm going to give a general introduction of kind of where we're going with the lobster law. And then from there, I will go into the lobster law itself, section by section. I won't read line for line, as we'll be here for longer than we have. The turkey will get cold. And so section by section, and also I will go over the lobster fishing plan. So overview, so this is my presentation tonight. We'll be talk about the lobster fishery. We'll talk about the community engagement results from the Gay Mauiak Nut Matinej Jagedjwe, overview of our lobster law, and then do the review of the section by section, and then the section by section on the fishing plan. So before I begin, it's good to introduce our fishery, or highlight how our fishery works. So our fishing zone is LFA 21B, Lobster Fishing Area 21B, and that's right there you see in the map. So here you have the Cascapedia River, and here you have Maguasha, and basically 21B is where Listuguj fishes. We have 6 or 5 licensed, there's 6 licensed total, and Listuguj is owner of 5 of those licenses. In 21A is where Giskabegiak fishes their lobster, and in area 23 is where you would find Ill River Bar fishermen. So there's Mi'kmaq all in this in our territory fishing lobster. So we have a commercial fishery in the spring, usually goes from May to July, roughly around 69 days, 68, 69 days. And we also have a food fishery in the fall, and that's about a 2-week fishery. So the management is an effort-based management, meaning there's no set quotas. So if you have this many traps, you have this many days, whatever lobster you catch is yours. So the limit is based on, it's measured in effort, and that's in trap days. So we have a total of 88,785 trap days, which begins in the fall. So whatever's fished in the fall time in the food fishery, what's left over in the spring of those 88,785 trap days is what's used up. Keeping in mind in the spring or in the fall time, they call it a catchability factor, which is basically a factor of 7, and that's because the science says that when the lobster are molten in the fall time, that they're hungrier, so your traps are more full. And generally, if you look at the land-ins, the land-ins are higher per trap than in the springtime because of this. So there's a factor of 7. So really, your days get reduced by a factor of 7 in the fall. So enforcement, DFO enforces the commercial area. So in the springtime, DFO is out there, and they have dockside monitors that check all the lobster that come out, make sure they're the right size, and there are no females. And then in the food fishery in the fall time, it's our community member that it's Listuguj Natural Resources Directorate that manages that, and our rangers do the enforcement. And we also have we hire our own dockside monitors. So each trap or each license has 235 traps per license, and we have a total of 5. So in the springtime, there are 4 licenses that are fished commercially with 235 traps each. And then in the fall time, we use 1 license with 235 traps. So and last year, if you were aware, we divvied up all those traps equally amongst the fishermen. So right now, we're managed by a top-down approach with DFO at the top that issues Listuguj a license. So here's your license. This is how you fish. And then Listuguj designates, who the fishermen are, and they fish according to that license. So essentially, that's an overview of our fishery. So the Let's Talk Lobster game Mawiak Nut Martinej Jagejawe, the lobster back in 2017, the lobster fishing plan was developed, and it was community members were given chance to comment on that. There was a lot of engagement that happened. There was a total of 15 meetings. So there was 6 public meetings and 9 targeted workshops. So there was elders, women, youth, and there was a total of 9 of those. Then in 2019, that's when we moved into this project here, the creating of our lobster law. And we had a total of 6 community events where there was 2 public meetings and a total of 4 targeted workshops. Again, we had tribal, or community knowledge holders, we had elders, and we had women, and we had the fishers. And you can see the handout that's got the little blue, right? And you see that's a summary of all our engagement results. So you can reference to that document. So in 2018, Listuguj signed a framework agreement. And this basically is an agreement that wants to work with the DFO on a number of things, and they're listed here. So basically, we want to work that, we revitalize and we get the government to recognize that Listuguj Mi'kmaq has governance and fishing rights. Revitalize and recognize that, we have mechanisms in our community that we can create our own laws and manage our own fisheries. And we want increased access, and also we want to support to manage ourselves, so fund and support. We want to improve the ecological sustainability of the fisheries, so do activities and projects that are good for the lobster, good for the ecosystem, and we want to do initiatives that would make our lobsters more economic if we go on a commercial aspect. So say, for example, a lobster shack, or how do we sell our own lobster at a higher price than selling it at the wharf. And again, capacity funding to support our role in fisheries overall. So, overview of the lobster law. So the lobster law presents a framework for how we're going to manage and govern ourselves. And again, the law is essentially for a community law, and it's how Listuguj is going to manage and govern Listuguj fishers with our own mechanisms, our own staff. So those are all the sections of the Listuguj lobster law. Those are all in there. And then the lobster fishing plan essentially is the plan that after the law, if the law gets approved tonight, the fishing plan is developed annually, so year to year, and it kind of is the ground rules on the water. So how the fishermen fish, so they got effort, maximum, minimum sizes of the lobster they can catch, take home, the harvesting area, who's the authorized fisherman, what's the authorized gear, what's the trap type, what's the trap size, the fishing season. So the fishing plan essentially is the rule book that on the ground when you're fishing is what's going to be followed. the law essentially is the framework that allows us to say, hey, we, Listuguj, determine how we're going to govern our own fishery. So when when we were presenting the lobster law in the workshops and the community presentations, we kind of had this is a kind of a management model that how you would manage a fishing plan. So you prepare a draft, it has to go through approval process, then it gets implemented, so you're fishing under the plan, and then you enforce that plan. So if someone is breaking the rules of that plan, how do you punish them, or make sure they're fishing right? So, and we had a lot of questions as who's involved in the plan, drafting the plan, who was involved in approving the plan, and but we presented some of these results, and we came up with these. So I know you can't read, it's kind of small, but essentially the management regime is going to consist of chief and council, natural resource directorate, the Listuguj oversight board, and the rangers. So the Listuguj oversight board is a new board we're going to form after this law passes, or if it gets passed. And essentially that's a community developed board. So it would be different representation of the community, and essentially they'll play a role in every aspect of the law. So phases of the fishing, so developing an annual fishing plan, we have consultation and negotiation. So DFO, unfortunately DFO will still give us a license, and they'll still put conditions, but that's to be negotiated. That's to say, well, this doesn't need to be in there because it's out of your mandate. And things that we can't control are things like conservation. So we still got to protect the lobster, ensure we're fishing sustainably. We got to ensure we're fishing safely. So there's some things we cannot give, but at the same time we work together on. So after consultations and negotiations, then we go into preparing and drafting the fishing plan. So chief and council, they will have to give the mandate to Natural Resources Directorate as per the law. They'll have to give do an OIC to make sure that the oversight board is formed as per the law, and there's also an ordinance council for the rangers. So chief and council, in preparing the law, will be doing that. Then at the approval stage, they'll have to sign an ordinance council that says, we approve the law and the law becomes law. And they're through the Natural Resources Directorate, their LMG is responsible for everything of this law. So if anything happens and the law is not followed, ultimately the responsibility is on LMG. In enforcement, they'll also develop rules on monitoring and non-compliance. So if a fisherman's breaks the rules, what happens? The chief and council have a say on that, of course, with the advice from the advisory board. But ultimately, they do have the final decision. So if chief and council feels a violation was severe enough that they can step in and say that we have to step in, they have that power. Natural Resources Director will be responsible for drafting the annual plan, publishing that plan on our website. And first, we need a website, so we got some work to do on that end. Then we're going to publish once it's approved, Natural Resources will publish that on our website. And we're responsible for implementing the plan on terms of the monitoring the fishing activities of the fishermen. So we do have to monitor with dockside monitors. We'll have to hire employees to do that. We will designate who's fishing under the plan, so we'll designate the fishermen, and we'll conduct the signs and restoration enhancement efforts. And if there's commercial components that the community wants to go down or different avenues that we see it could increase the value of our lobster, we'll be developing those commercial initiatives. And again, all of this, the Natural Resources will be hiring staff to support the law and support our initiatives in the fishery. So the oversight board, when the law is being, the annual fishing plan is being drafted, and they are going to advise the Natural Resource Directorate, and we'll work together on that. Then once it gets approved, there's going to have to be 2 community consultations to present the plan, and that's where community has an opportunity to comment on the plan. Then they'll bring that back to chief and council for approval, and chief and council will determine with the oversight board that was there enough people that showed up, was your consultation satisfactory, and if not, we'll have to go back, re-strategize, or they'll approve it. Also, the oversight board is responsible for any amendments. So if one day chief and council says, we don't like this part of the law, we want it changed, there's an amendment process that the oversight board is involved in, where they have to bring those amendments to the community, same process, review 2 times with the community, take the feedback back, advise council that if it was satisfactory or not, and then move forward. If the amendments get approved, then a new order in council gets signed and the law is updated. And the annual fishing plan, this is a process that happens year to year, because the fishing plan changes based on so many criteria. You know, the science can say that the trap sizes are getting smaller, and that's a better output for lobster in the next future, for future populations. They'll change the traps, the size of the lobster you could take, an example. So when we implement the law, the oversight board is going to be there to make sure that the law is being followed, and they're part of the, there'll be a schedule of meetings that they'll have to attend, and there's a terms of reference that we're going to develop for them. So enforcement, so say if a fisherman, you know, doesn't follow the lobster law, the fishing plan, the oversight board will review any violations recorded by the rangers, and they'll advise council on the appropriate resolutions that would be stated in the law. So the law does have a strike system similar to the salmon law: strike 1, strike 2, strike 3, and that's on Schedule C, I believe. And so if you look in that, you can see what those violations will look like. But if there's something, the oversight board will still be involved, and they can advise the council on what's an appropriate resolution. And again, when there's rules of non-compliance, the rules itself, the oversight board will play a role in that as well, on establishing what should strike 1, strike 2, strike 3 look like, and if there's any future changes to be made. And the rangers, the last corner there, they play a role in basically monitoring, conducting patrols, surveillance, investigations, and develop educational programs on how to fish properly, how to reduce your impact in the environment. We haven't decided what these programs will be yet, but we'll be working with the rangers on that. So essentially, from the top-down model I showed you a while ago, this is going to be the annual cycle of our fishing plan. So here you have, we still got to negotiate our fishing license with DFO. That's something we still have to work with DFO on. But Chief and Council and Fisheries and Oceans will negotiate what we feel is right for us, the communities, and we'll tackle that at that level. And then the Natural Resource Directorate will prepare the fishing plan draft. And again, the fishing plan is the rules on the water of how we're going to fish lobster. Then after that, it goes to the approval process with Chief and Council. And again, see the oversight boards in the middle, because they play a role in every part of this developing the fishing plan, the annual cycle of the fishing plan development. Then once it gets approved at the Chief of Council level, after working with the oversight board, we implement it, we go fishing. So Natural Resources Director, we're doing dockside monitoring, we're doing science projects, we're weighing the lobster, sizing them up, whatever is part of our science plan that year. And the fishers are fishing lobster. And this could be spring, or this could be the fall. It's lobster fisheries overall. And then once the plan is implemented, we got to enforce it. So the rangers and the fishers will have a relationship on the water, and the oversight board plays a role when they'll come in when they need to come in, as per stated in the law. So something, I put a picture here of fishery tags. This says Gaspagawagi Fisheries LFA 21B, and then a number, tag number. One of the things that we were able to negotiate this year with DFO was to issue our own tags. Instead of DFO giving us tags, Listuguj was able to create and brand our own tags and give them to our fishermen. So this is a small step, but I mean it's still a recognition that we can do administration and manage some aspects of our fishery. It is small, but it's just I wanted to highlight that. So next step. So after the law gets approved or not. So I got a diagram here. So we have a vote tonight, gets approved. Chief and Council will have to develop OICs to give, establish the oversight board. to give natural resources the new direction and mandate based on the law, and for the Listuguj Rangers to enforce under the law. For the Oversight Board, we still have to develop in terms of reference. We do have a kind of a draft working document it's essentially in the law, but that still has to be tweaked, and it's an evolving process. Then we're gonna have to develop a work plan, when are they gonna meet, how often they meet, what's involved in each meeting, and then training. There's a training component as well, because they're community members and they might not be knowledgeable on lobster management, lobster science, so there is a learning curve, and we'll meet them halfway with some training. Natural Resources Directorate, we're going to basically turn this into a project, and like I said, Chief and Council sign, an OIC after if it gets approved. It does overnight. This isn't going to create these systems. It'll essentially establish a framework, but we still have to develop and invest and train and make sure that we're ready, and what do we have to change on the ground. So that's the next steps. We'll create a project, we'll have a work plan, we gotta update our website, and we train and hire staff. So for example, we got a biologist being hired on this year, and we have a lot of science projects involved that require diving, and we need to get underwater to start counting our lobster to get better numbers and estimates of how much lobster are in our area. So, and the Listuguj Rangers, we're working on a training initiative. We're going to bring some training and update training and train new Rangers hopefully we have a school that will come to Listuguj, and it's about a 53-week program, and we can have bring some training back to our community members to be Rangers. So that was just kind of the next steps. Oh yeah. And if it doesn't get approved, well, we do have to go back to the drawing board and realign ourselves and figure out, what does the community see as what if they don't like this law, why not? Figure that out and go back. But we don't stop. We keep going. So that was my overview. So now I go by section. If you guys follow along with the law, if you want, there's your law document here. So starting with the preamble, that essentially is kind of introduces the law and why we're doing what we're doing, and it states kind of some evolving historical facts that lead up to why Listuguj says we can create our own laws. So it recognizes, we have a sacred responsibility from the Creator to protect the water, the land, and all living things. We do coexist with other people. There, we've been in relationships with other nations that we do coexist, and it recognizes that we do have Aboriginal and treaty rights and title, and we are working with traditional leadership and other governance on essentially our governance and management of our own fish resources, and that we essentially have an inherent jurisdiction to make our own laws and govern ourselves. Whereas, and therefore. This section, short title, essentially just, instead of saying Listuguj Mi'kmaq First Nation law and the lobster fishery and lobster fishing, the lobster law. So that's just simplifies how we use the reference to that title in the document. Definitions, interpretation. This basically defines how certain terms are used in the document and what they mean. So it tells who the council are, chief and council, who a Listuguj Mi'kmaq is, what's the lobster fishing plan, who is the oversight board, who are the rangers, and who's the natural resource directorate, and also describes how we will interpret our own community oral traditions and our customs. So, and then you'll notice some slides will have a little key community change. So once we were presenting the draft law to the community, they kind of made some suggestions to us. So I included those here. Oh, and I also include the page number here if you want to follow along the page. So one of the key changes was it said will be interpreted, but Mi'kmaq customs and oral traditions will be interpreted, or no, may be relied on, but we said no, they will be used. We will use our Mi'kmaq customs and traditions. The next section is guiding principles, and so these guiding principles were established in 2017 during the interim lobster fishing plan engagement. And so the law will follow these guiding principles. And guiding principles are some things that we don't change. So if there's a hard decision we have to make, if any of these guiding principles are broken or not followed, that's generally a decision we won't make. So Angotamuk is taking care of something in a careful manner. And again, there's a bigger definition in the law you can read. Abhajigmuin, sharing, giving back to one's community. Get me did manage is respect. And wilt did is we agree in thought. So essentially how we would work together as a community while respecting the lobster and each other. So the next section is on the Lobster Oversight Board, and this kind of explains what the Oversight Board, who will they consist of, what is their role, and basically describes that they'll be formed through an order in council. The membership could include fishers, elders, a member of council, probably a non-voting member, women, youth, or other interested community members. It talks about the roles, responsibilities, and how they'll be guided by terms of reference. So key community change was that we wanted to ensure that there is a terms of reference being developed, and so that was put in there in point 10. So the annual fishing plan, this describes the process of how the fishing plan is formed, who is involved, and what is the process, so it outlines that. And again, the fishing plan is what's used to manage and administer the lobster fishery of a given year. Keep in mind, we never want to stop our lobster fishermen. So say if we go through that community process where, the oversight board has to do two community consultations, and say if it's not enough, go back, but the fishing season's starting. We have something in here, a clause in here that says that the fishing plan of last year will apply to this year until we come up with a fishing plan. So we have also the components of the plan, how it's communicated, and the role of the oversight board, chief and council, and natural resources. So key community changes, point 17 is that chief and council can adopt a new fishing plan mid-season. So say we couldn't decide, last year's fishing plan is being used, it's mid-season, they're using that fishing plan, and then finally we get our fishing plan approved. Chief and council has the discretion to decide if they want to use that plan mid-season, and then you'll have to change your strategy if there's major changes to the fishing plan. And that's not preferred that we get this process done before everyone goes out in the water. So we started we're hoping to start this process in July, if it gets approved, for the fall fishery that's coming up in September, October. And point 18, there will also be a report developed. So a year-end report is kind of to give an overview of the fishery, what happened, what went on, and it'll just be, the community asked for that, so we're going to commit to so they put that into the law, that we will develop, natural resources will develop a report, publish it on our website, that gives an overview of the fishing plan of that year. So we say in this law, the next section is on territorial application. We're saying, it's the whole Bay of Chaleur and Ikaspegawagi territory. However, in the fishing plan itself, we determine, we'll determine where the fishing will take place. So if that could change, for example, if someone buys a license in 21A, then the fishing plan will change, not the law. So the fishing plan will change year to year. However, it just says that we have a big territory, and we can fish our territory. Except on the ground, realistically, we do fish in 21B. That's where we kind of were put, or that's what was negotiated. But if we go out in 21A, we'll be with fishing. Not in conflict, well, probably some confrontation with Ikaspegawagi, and if we go out in 23 Eel River Bar. So we have to work together with other First Nations if we do plan to go outside of 21B. But 21B is where we fish currently. And so point 20, key community change, point 20 was added to reflect that reality. It accommodates that if we get access in another zone, well, it wouldn't change too much because we're saying as per fishing plan, so it'll be in the fishing plan. So the management regime. So this describes the roles of each party in implementing the plan. So the plan will be implemented through the Natural Resources Directorate, will be responsible for implementing the plan. And it also describes that we can enter in co-management agreements with DFO or Quebec. So any other interested party that wants to say, we want to work with you in your fishery, and there's an agreement that comes into play. Same thing with like the salmon fishery. There's a MMFP agreement for the rangers, and there's also a AFS agreement with the DFO. Similar to the lobster, it recognizes that we can work with other governments. The Natural Resources Directorate, we're going to manage the fishing plan, fishing activities, hire the community or external personnel. So if we require a biologist, if we don't have one in the community, we'll go out and we'll search for a biologist. And we also designate who can and can't fish. Compliance describes the roles of the rangers in enforcing the law and the fishing plan. And there'll be, the rules are established. They'll be established through an OIC, but they can be seen in Schedule C, which is page 13. And the Oversight Board can advise on those rules, and they can advise on the violations if someone breaks the rule. But ultimately, again, Chief of Council have the final say. And rangers are the only agency that can interfere with the Listuguj fishers. So if someone's breaking a law, the DFO, we're saying you cannot come in and stop our fishermen or take our gear. Our rangers do that if they determine that a law is being broken. So, point 32, key community change. So we wanted to include the Oversight Board in developing and monitoring the rules. And it clarifies that Schedule C is part of the amendment process. So if we change the rules that the rangers are set out in Schedule C, we have to go through the amendment process. Resource allocation, it just says that we know there's no set quota. We're on an effort-based system. So for example, a quota system is you have 50,000 pounds to fish, and if you fish that 50,000, you're done. You're out of the water. But an effort-based system is doesn't matter how much you catch, but here's your window. Here's your number of traps. Here's the number of days. Here's your zone, and whatever you catch is yours. And if there are limits, those will be presented in our fishing plan, Schedule A. And LMG may alter the effort for conservation purposes. So say, if the event the lobster stocks crash, and it's not sustainable for anyone to go out there and fish lobster, then Chief and Council can step in and say, we can't fish anymore because we got to let the lobster rebound. But right now, the lobster's the highest it's been, but there is fisheries change, stocks collapse, and you never know what can happen. So use of resource. So this basically states that we have a government, we have the right to govern how we want to use the lobster as a community. So it'll be described in the fishing plan every year how we're going to use the lobster. So do we want to eat it with the food fishery, or do we want to sell it for commercial purposes? That'll be up to the community to decide, not DFO. And that's what this law says. So it's not saying that, oh, hey, I can go out and sell all my lobster now. No, it just means that we're saying we can make that decision if we want to, taking that away from the DFO. But in the lobster fishing plan, it will be determined if it's a food or if it's for commercial purposes. Next section is special protection areas. So describes, if we find a specific area in 21B that's important egg development habitat for females, then we would designate that as special protection area. Basically, which is you can't fish there. And these are protected for conservation purposes, and those will be set out in Schedule D, page 14. Currently, there's none, so it's not a big change there. So coming into force, this basically describes how a law becomes the law, and the date will be specified in the OIC. So once the OIC is signed, then there'll be a date associated at when this date, the lobster fishing plan and the lobster law comes into effect. And we're aiming for July for this one. Key community change, point 43. So LMG can establish the fishing plan when there's no oversight board. So like I said, it takes time to develop these things. So say fishing plan happens overnight, they need, or the law gets approved, then we establish a fishing plan with an oversight board. But we don't have an oversight board yet. We don't have a term of reference yet. Still takes some time to form an oversight board. So point 43 was just included so that it describes a transition process. So we don't have an oversight board yet, but so LMG itself can start the first fishing plan, and then after the oversight board is formed, then the rangers are trained, and so on and so on. We have the science capacity. It's an evolving plan, but this point was just to recognize that at the start there'll be a transition process before, if there's no oversight board. So the amendment process. So we want to make a change to the law, and council can propose a change at any time. So this section describes how the laws and schedules change, and the oversight board has to hold 2 community meetings at a minimum to kind of go over to review the changes with the community, kind of like how this is set up here. Oversight board will share those results with council, and if accepted, an OIC will be signed that introduces the new changes to the law. So it's a good way to protect the law and the lobster and involve community's input in the process. So any changes made will have to include the community. So next I'm going to go over the fishing plan, and I'm just going to breeze through this. Essentially, again, it just talks about the effort. So right now we're at 88,785 trap days, and this effort is determined by science. So right now we rely on DFO science because we don't have the capacity. We don't have the big funding, we don't have the large staff of biologists, technicians, but we're looking to find money, invest in our science, and start doing our own research so we can determine what's the best trap days. That conservation factor of 7 that's determined for us in the fall food fishery, is that number 7? Is that an accurate number? So these things we got to kind of invest in science and kind of answer our own questions. Again, minimum maximum size is what's the minimum size lobster, what's the maximum size lobster you can keep. And this describes the harvesting area. So right now it's 21B, but again, that can change, and every year we can change that. If we get new access in another zone, it'll be included in here. This describes who is an authorized fisher, and we will give a certificate that they can fish under this law, and they have to have that on them if they are going to get stopped by the rangers. Authorized fishing gear will be determined. I don't think there's generally not too many changes, but the trap sizes based on science can change. If they say there's a certain hole that the lobster go into, they increase or decrease that hole based on science. So they have to have their gear identified with certain buoys and markers. Each trap has to have a tag, and there's 1 tag per trap, certain amount of traps per fisherman. So those rules are generally common practice right now and will still be followed. So additional conservation measures, so some things that we're doing to protect the lobster, and one thing we're going to implement this year is a V-notching. Essentially, V-notching is it's like a toenail clipper, but you kind of clip the tail. As you pick up a lobster, it has eggs on it. It's a female. Generally, the rule is you don't harvest that, you put it back. But the V-notching is what you would do is you would clip the tail of that egg to lobster, And it's like a little triangle you leave on the tail, and you put it back. So one day when another fisherman comes by and picks it up, and there's no eggs, because it's generally, if you have a very good eye, you can't tell if it's a male or female. But if you have the V-notch and there's no eggs, you know, hey, this was a female at one point that was making eggs, so you would put that back. So the V-notch in protocol is we would put all the lobster back that have a V-notch. And any lobster, so all females, we won't harvest. So the V-notch, so yeah, the V-notch essentially is just a marker. So mutilation just describes how you would hurt a lobster. So yeah, no fisherman should have a lobster identified by V-notch. We'll have the right tools. We already got the tools. We have a protocol, and we're going to train all the fishermen on how to V-notch a lobster properly. And no individuals designated the fisherman's lobster fisherman may possess. Yeah, okay. So yeah, this basically says you cannot just rip off the tails of a lobster and put it back. It's got to be the whole lobster. The fishing season will be determined by in the fishing plan will be determined by the LMG and the fishing conditions that are negotiated. All landings will be inspected by dockside monitors appointed by Natural Resources Directorate. So we did that in the last fall fishery. We hired dockside monitors. Essentially, they weigh size, and they identify if it's a female or not, and if it's not a regulation lobster that's not part of the fishing plan or law, it'll get put back. Incidental catches is essentially saying we don't want other fisheries hurting other species. So we don't want the lobster fishery hurting halibut, or we don't want a halibut fishery hurting lobster. So essentially this states that if you get a fish that's not the intended target fish, not a lobster in your trap, return it if you can. And that way you're not hurting another species with another fishery. But if you can't, it's dead, then it's dead, keep it, use it. So closures, it just says that if there's a closure, we'll announce it, and you have to respect that as a fisherman. You have to respect the closure. That happens a lot in the snow crab fishery, for example, but with our lobster fishery, generally there's not too many closures that happen, but it's important to include it. And community contribution is if we're required to invest or put money into the fishery, then LMG will. And thank you, everyone. That's it for me.
Okay, great. So just before we open up the floor for questions, I just wanted to make one announcement and do a bit of a summarization of what we heard through Denny's really amazing presentation. So first of all, I just wanted to acknowledge some people who sometimes are easily forgotten for their efforts, but are a really important part of the process. So we have Wade, Hillary, and Felix here as our media people who always do a fantastic job with our setup, with our filming, with our live stream. And they're usually always behind the scenes, but let's take a moment and really thank them for their hard work and give them a round of applause. You will notice that Hillary and Felix are both taking pictures, and Felix is working on a really cool community project, a documentary for fisheries about this lobster process and this community engagement process. But if at any point you don't feel comfortable with having your photo taken or being on camera, you can just let either Hillary or Wade know, and they'll be sure to omit you from the film or to not post any of the pictures with you in them. Perfect. So just before we go into the question and answer, I want to summarize some really cool things that I heard while I was listening through that presentation. One of the things that I really liked and appreciated that Denny did was highlight in red those key changes that were made to the law because of community contributions. That is really, really important, and I want to bring that up because it really highlights how incredibly impactful each and every one of you have been on this process. Right? It really makes this law-making process a community effort when we can say that community members directly impacted some of these principles and changes in this document, and had fisheries not decided to go through such an intense engagement, there would be some really valuable things missing from this document because we would have never had the chance to come and talk to you. So again, I'm feeling in a really great spirited mood. Let's give yourselves a round of applause for having such a great impact on this process. And there were some really great suggestions and key changes made, so I really appreciate how you took the time to highlight that. One thing I wanted just to make clear again is that relationship between the lobster fishing law and the lobster fishing plan. So the lobster fishing law, it's the governance process, and it's not going to have the details that include how we distribute tags, when our exact fishing date start is, how many boats we're going to have. Those are all details that go into the fishing plan, and the fishing plan is made every year, and it can be customized to and can accommodate whatever's happening in the fishing industry at the time, right? So it can account for all the changes that might go on from season to season to season. The lobster law doesn't really change that much. As you guys heard, to make an amendment to the law, it's quite a process, right? Chief and council have to indicate a change to the oversight board have to do their due diligence with community engagement work, there has to be at least 2 community meetings, no changes to the law can be made behind doors or in secret. So the law is more of a permanent fixture, but the law clearly says that every year the lobster fishing law has to be approved by community through 2 meetings. So the law and the fishing plan are connected, most definitely. And that was one of the reasons why they decided having a fishing law included with a fishing plan was really, really important for Listuguj. So all the key details that some of you are very interested in, specifically like tag dispersal, when our fishing season starts, how we're going to make changes depending on lobster populations or the health and safety of the lobster, those are all going to be included in the fishing plan. And the lobster law says the fishing plan has to be approved every year through community and through chief and council. Does that relationship seem clear, how those two important documents are related? The other thing just to review are the 4 main components, right? So chief and council are still going to be the ultimate decision makers with approving the lobster fishing plan every year. But in order for chief and council to do that, they must receive their report and their recommendations from this oversight board, which is a new level of governance that they're looking to introduce in this project. So the oversight committee is going to be the ones really making sure that the LMG Fisheries Department, who is in charge of lobster fishing for the community, does their due diligence, gets out to the community, are crafting plans that make sense to community members, that make sense to the science available to them, that makes sense to the conservation efforts, that makes sense to the traditional knowledge. The oversight board is kind of doing all those checks and balances, and then they're making the final recommendation to chief and council, so it's less of a process for chief and council to be able to approve. And then of course the rangers are the enforcement part of that, right? So we know that it's going to take some time to build full capacity for our rangers. So even when the lobster law, should the lobster law become approved by community and eventually adopted by chief and council, there may be some parts that will get adopted a little later on, right? So the section that talks about rangers being in full capacity for enforcement, that may take a while. So chief and council will approve the law, could potentially approve the law, and just wait to enact and enforce that section of the law when the rangers are ready, when we've built that capacity. Same thing with the research and the data collection. Right now, as Denny said, they're looking to hire their own biologist. They don't want to rely solely on DFO science anymore. We want to be able to rely on our own science. But that's going to take a little bit of time to build that capacity, right? So when we're ready, an OIC could be passed that says, now we're ready to enact and enforce section 6 of the lobster fishing law. So that's important to remember, that just because this law could potentially be passed by community and could be adopted by OIC, that not all components are ready to launch right away, but when they are ready, it would just take another OIC from chief and council signaling that that component of the law is ready to go. Does that seem clear? Everyone can understand that, how that process might work? The other thing is that the oversight board is going to be responsible for any amendments to the fishing plan and, like we talked about, to the law. And it's going to suggest the plans for approval. But the other important thing is that it's going to deal with any sort of breach of conduct that might come from the fishing plan. And as one of our community members mentioned to us during the engagements, words matter. So they were very careful in making sure that the vocabulary of the document was exactly what we meant. And if you look at item number 33, which is on page 7, It says the Listuguj Lobster Oversight Board may review violations of any provision of this law recorded by Mi'kmaq Rangers. And the word may is in there for a very specific reason. It doesn't mean that every single violation is going to have to automatically go to the Oversight Board. Once the Rangers are at full capacity and have all the appropriate training and are, fully ready to implement the enforcement of the lobster law, there are going to be some obvious violations that they could issue directly that don't necessarily need to go to the Oversight Board. If there's anything that's sensitive or anything that escalates, at that point, sure, Oversight Board would be the committee to handle it. But eventually, once the Rangers are at full capacity, there will be, as Denny highlighted, a 3-strike system where obvious breaches could be handled between Ranger and Fisher. But for anything that's a bit litigious or anything that's a bit sensitive, anything that escalates beyond the Rangers, of course the Oversight Board is going to be responsible for that. Is that clear for everybody, understanding how that process is going to work with the Rangers and the Oversight Board? It doesn't mean that the Oversight Board has to deal with every single thing, but they're there as that main force and that main support for the Rangers. So for the next steps, as Denny highlighted, should this law be passed, the first thing they're going to do is working on getting that Oversight Board put together and working on those terms of reference. And that's something that very likely could happen fairly quickly. LMG will then assume, they already have the mandate, but now they will officially assume the mandate for the lobster fishery under the lobster law, and they'll start with their implementations right away, right? They'll start working on the lobster fishing plan, they'll start working on their tag dispersal system, they'll start working on their safety enhancements and training. Those are things that can happen right away if this lobster law should be passed. The things, like we said, that are going to need to work on and will probably be fully implemented later are like the Rangers' enforcement capacity, the research, and the conservation efforts. But next steps, what you can expect right away is they're going to start working immediately on those things. The other really important thing to remember is that the part about last year's plan coming into effect, if Chief and Council haven't been able to approve the plan for the current year. And one of the reasons they really wanted to put this in was concern from our fishing community by saying, you know what, things happen. Sometimes Chief and Council can't meet, or sometimes the Oversight Board, there's been delays in making a decision. We don't want to have to wait to get official approval before we can go out on our fishing season. We'll lose some time, and that's very valuable. So what the law says is, in the event, they're going to try their very best to get that new year plan approved before the fishing season starts. But in the rare event that it isn't able to happen, it does not stop our fishers from going out on the water. It will not delay them because last year's plan will be in effect. And then again, it's just talking about the resource allegation, the use of the resource. So even though as Denny highlighted, lobster populations are thriving right now, this lobster law, we're trying to make it like a permanent fixture in Listuguj, right? So in 20 years from now, if the lobster populations crash, or if Listuguj decides that they need to take extra measures to protect the lobster, because remember our guiding principles, right? Angodamuk, taking care of something in a special way. Get me data manage, respect. Those are two of the guiding principles that we always have to keep in mind when we're making decisions on lobster. So if Chief and Council and the Oversight Board and if LMG Fisheries believe that either of those things are in jeopardy, they could decide to make some drastic changes to the lobster fishery, and that's what the law is saying, that the power is with Listuguj to make those sorts of decisions. Not to say that if, nationally or globally, DFO has some concerns that could also affect the lobster fishery, but if DFO is alarmed because of lobster populations, then most likely Listuguj would be as well. Other changes to the law. Oh, I think that was it. Yeah, I think that was it. So again, just keeping in mind those, Datamek, Get Me Data Manage, Abajiginmuin, and Angodamuk, those 4 guiding principles. That's really important to keep in mind that those are the basis for all of this work done with the lobster law and all of this work done with the lobster fishery. So at this point, those are just some of the notes that I took that I thought were particularly interesting about Denny's presentation. So at this point, Ryan is going to start bringing out the food for dinner. It's going to be buffet style, full turkey dinner. But if any community members have any questions, I'm going to invite Fred Metallic, Zachary Davis, and Denny. They'll be up at the front. If you have any questions, please approach the microphone and ask freely. This is the opportunity you have. The online voting technically did open 20 minutes ago, so did the in-person voting, but I would encourage you to go through the question and answer period first before you cast your ballot. But it is officially open if you're curious. I believe so, it's on.
Hello. First of all, I want to say thank you, Dawn and Denny. I've been to all your sessions and the information was awesome. And every time I went, there was different information that came out there and I asked more questions. But you did an awesome job with this. I mean, you get my vote. But during all our consultations, I noticed that there was stuff missing. I don't know if it's part of the law in regards to how you're going to process the tags to the community members, to the fishermen. I didn't see that in here. That's one of my questions. The next question I had was, are the rangers going to, like they're implementing these certain things, but I don't see anything on here about safety gears, like what they have to wear. Are their boats safe to be out there? I didn't see that in any of this part. Is that going to be part of a law also, or is that going to be part of your that lobster fishing plan? And yeah, because you have it on page, like you have it as an example on page 9, the authorized fishing gear. It doesn't say anything about their gear in general. Are you letting our guys go out there without the proper equipment? So that was my concern, was that, I mean, due to previous incidents that happened in our community. And my last question is, what is the percentage, maybe Chief Darcy can answer this one, what is the percentage that you're looking at to pass this law this evening? Is there a certain number that you're looking at?
Excellent questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will let Chief Darcy elaborate on that last part, but I can let you know that the purpose of the vote here tonight is to indicate to Chief and Council community approval and validation. So it's not exactly set up in a way that no matter what happens, like as an official ratification, right? So the results of the vote tonight are going to be used as the most important indicator to Chief and Council on whether or not they should consider passing this law, but it's not set up as an official ratification state. So that's not to give you the impression that your vote is not important. It is incredibly important. It's just not an official ratification where whatever the results of the vote are would indicate mandatory implementation. So there is no exact percentage that we're looking at. We're just looking at whether it's the yes votes or the no votes prevail, and then that will be used as the most important tool for Chief and Council when making their decision. And as soon as Denny's done answering, if Chief Darcy would like to elaborate, he can come on up. So Denny, your questions are regarding to the reasons why in the law it doesn't specifically talk about the tag distribution and the safety gear for Chief and Council, and her question is whether or not those things should be in the law or whether they're proper places in the fishing plan.
Thanks, Sherry. In regards to the tag distribution, generally the lobster fishing plans for the fishers and the water. The tags given out to community members at the food fishery, that's generally a more of an administrative process. There's one of the realities is we have, a lot of community members, not enough lobster. So we had to make certain rules as to how we give out the tags. And the point was to, the last change we made last season was to ensure that more community members are getting a feed of lobster. So the plan won't have, that's more of an administrative process, that won't be involved in the plan. I don't think so, unless community and oversight board say, we need to include this in a fishing plan, then it can very well be in there the next year or the next plan, if the community wants that. In terms of safety gear for rangers, that's again an internal process. We do have regulations and rules to follow, and there will be a safety plan that the department will have to follow, and each ranger will have to respect that. And again, the same thing with the fishers. They are heavily regulated by Transport Canada, and if they go out, like safety and conservation, we can't negotiate that. If we're hurting the lobster, then we're hurting the lobster. Someone will stop us. If we're not being safe when we're going out there, someone's going to stop us. So it's like a safe seat belt. They have certain rules they got to follow on the water, and Transport Canada will enforce those.
Okay, so then, thank you so much for your question. Just to extra clarify that, things like safety concerns, things like tag dispersal, things like when we're gonna start and stop our fishing season, those are all incorporated into the annual plan, and the annual plan has to be approved by community members, the oversight board, and chief and council every year. Now, the law says, the reason we even have that process is because the law says we must do that. So the law talks about how we're gonna govern ourselves. The fishing plan talks about all the details on how we do it. So you wouldn't necessarily expect to see those details in the law, but the law specifically says you must have a fishing plan and it must be approved by those 3 levels every year. Does that answer your question? Great. And then, so Chief Darcy would like to elaborate a little more on your last point.
So first off, Don, amazing job answering that question, and it's a great question. I think the important part for us in looking at this law is not so much how many people vote on the law, but what is the consensus that we're getting from the community. If it comes in at, say, a 51-49, it shows that there's still some work to be done, right? But if it comes in, say, at 70 or 90%, it shows what we've put together here, the community is very much behind. And I think that's the more important thing, is that we're getting that consensus and building that up, and I think that you've been a big part of that. Getting to this law now, getting to what we have today, is very much driven by our community. To me, that's a more important thing than saying, 50 people voted or 1,000 people voted. It's what percentage is in favor, and how well informed are our community members. So thank you for that question.
Are there any more questions that anybody would like to pose before we have our wonderful dinner? And if there's any questions that you would like answered before you feel confident enough to head back to the polls. Oh, we have a few, great.
Yeah, good point. Thanks for coming out and sharing your information, Denny and Don, regarding the process of the fishing law. I've been to several lunches. We've had lunches, and it was very informative. I've asked a lot of questions, and you've answered a lot of the questions. Was kind of disappointed about the show up, because there was only like a handful of people from this community that did participate during the lunches, but I hope we do get somewhere during this process. I agree with it. We were more in detail at these meetings, at the lunches, so I have a general idea quickly of what you were going to say. So I don't have any questions about that, but I do have some regarding the oversight board. So Denny, you were saying that the oversight board, those people that would be selected would be educated regarding the lobster, okay? So they have to be knowledgeable, the first to be knowledgeable regarding the lobster. So they would be the advisory board to the chief and council and the community?
Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't want to cut you off.
Yeah, knowledgeable regarding the law and the plan, right?
Yeah, so the law, if there's any changes to the law, generally we try not to change the law, because that we want the law to say, oh, we can govern ourselves, here's our framework, but the fishing plan will, on the ground, this is what fishing will look like. And that could change year to year based on stocks, the season, any other conservation measures. So the oversight board will be, generally we want to make sure that it's a community process. So we want community members to be another level that, chief of council, outside of chief of council, outside of the Department of Natural Resources, that the community can kind of oversee how we make decisions. Do they have to be lobster biologists, lobster experts? No. We'll have that support, we'll have that technician, we'll have that training, and we'll try to simplify it as much as we can so community and the oversight board can understand. And we will always work together, natural resources, we'll always present the facts and the information. So it's generally to make the best decision for the community and for the lobster and ensure that we are saying what we're going to do in that law and the fishing plan, that the oversight board is saying, hey, you guys are going above the law by doing this. Those certain things they can say. And if it's like a specific science-related question, then there will be training, there'll be information shared, and we can all have a discussion together on what's the best, change or approach. And they'll bring that to the community to discuss on.
Is there an oversight board now?
No.
No?
That's the next step, would be to kind of get that process rolling and find out, how do we do election process, who picks who, how do they get nominated. So there's some work to do on our end if the vote goes ahead.
Okay.
If it gets approved.
Thank you.
So just to add a little bit more to that, right now there is no oversight board, and that's not really a process or a component of the governance structure. What the fisheries is looking to do is do something brand new. So instead of going from fisheries department to chief and council for decisions, community members kept asking, well, how can we be involved? The oversight board is going to be how that happens. And as Denny was saying, we want this oversight board to be very successful, so we want to set our members up for success. It doesn't mean you have to come in with all of these qualifications, but once you're a part of the oversight board, they're going to train you on just kind of knowing the general overview of lobster, giving you a bit of a history of how DFO relationships are, some information on conservation and protection and how to calculate lobster stocks, so that everybody sitting around that table is going to be able to make the best decision possible for lobster. So it's not meant to discourage anybody from joining, meaning like, oh geez, I don't really know that much about lobster, but I care a lot about lawmaking and I care a lot about the environment. And it's looking to be a diverse board, right? They want representation from the fishing community. They would love to have representation from youth, elders, leadership, women, a whole bunch. But the whole training component is just to make sure that everybody at the table is comfortable making these very high-level important decisions. Was there another question? I saw, oh, great.
Mogo kay gadu bibani kasiu. Kasi gadu Dr. Fred gadu kanuada kay kasi ne kamen waya lagluswakan na kiswi gagal. Pas gadu kanuada lis uktesh ke waya. Kes kamen uktesh ke waya wi gamo lakala. Gluswakan na obelwi gasagal. Kanuada testandigan. Muda ejigo dan nudakap telweb words matter.
Yes. So I will pass the microphone to Dr. Fred just so that he can kind of summarize that, and it's mostly for the benefit of our online viewers.
Holidays, but yeah, well, on Janice, the nil big women, she did a buig and the gluzuan. This project is called Moyaguru Demonis Jagajaway. And when we developed the harvesting plan and developed these principles, we try to look at it from a Mi'kmaq point of view. And the best way to understand it from a Mi'kmaq point of view is to go to the language. And so we drafted a harvesting plan and developed some principles after talking to many people about how best to manage your fishery and the thinking behind those decisions. So we came up with some principles like Anko Demuk, Abijigimuen, Full day and get me day diminish. And if you ask any Mi'kmaq speaker what do those principles mean, they'll talk to you all day. And so it's important that our values, it's important that our beliefs, it's important that our philosophy inform the way we manage lobster fisheries. It's important that when we make decisions that we be cognizant of those principles, those things that are important to us. It's important that when you're developing laws, that the law reflects, you know, your worldview, it reflects your cultural values, it reflects the way we think, what we believe, how we believe. And if we could write this in Mi'kmaq, we would. In fact, Zach and I talked about it. I said, you know what? You know, one of the things we probably should have done is probably write this law in Mi'kmaq first, and then write it in English. But we didn't have enough time, but that's still something we can consider. Because I think it's important to highlight the significance of what we're trying to do tonight. This is not a law under Canadian law. It's not a law under Canadian law. It's a law under our responsibilities to this territory. It's a law under our responsibilities to each other. It's a law under our responsibilities to the judges. You know, this is not anybody else's territory. It's our territory. You know, we've always said this is our territory and we'll take care of it. We don't need the Canadian law to tell us what laws we need to put forward. We don't need managers from Gaspé to tell us how to manage fisheries. We don't need people, scientists from outside, telling us how to conduct science. We don't need anybody to tell us how to take care of our resource. You know, we've been here for thousands of years, long before anybody else arrived. We were managing fine. We were making decisions fine. We were upholding laws fine. We didn't need other laws. Laws were already in place in this territory. So all we're trying to do today is put forward a law that protects our right to manage fisheries. We're just trying to put forward a law that protects our role in governance. And I can tell you today that there are a lot of people in this country who don't want to see the Mi'kmaq put laws in place to manage their fisheries. There's a lot of people in this country not ready for the Mi'kmaq to assume the responsibility to govern their fisheries. There's a lot of people in this country not ready to accept that the Mi'kmaq have a right to pass laws in their territory to take care of their fisheries in accordance with their values and beliefs. You know that you know, a lot of people would say you don't have the power to do that. But the fact of it is, we're all here tonight. It's up to us to say whether or not that law goes forward. And it's up to us to say whether or not it does or not, does not. You know away, so well all in Genesis I don't big women of Shida, they don't walk at the hell when the glue swag and the dig book see but the king like Alalia.
Thank you so much for your comment, and Dr. Fred for your response. And just a little tidbit of information, from the Listuguj Mi'kmaq Community Plan perspective, there was also a very strong recommendation to have all of our formal government documents done in Mi'kmaq, so it's available in both languages. So that's a little interesting tidbit. Are there any other questions from the community regarding the lobster law that you would like to ask before you feel comfortable voting? Oh, yes, we have one from an elder.
I'm glad what the doctor said. A long time ago, in our community, you know, it brings back such good memories. They used to come to us, and I remember the government used to come to us back then, in the 50s and 60s, and ask us about our fishing and how we conserved and how the water ran and with year to year. I also observed from that time to now, the government, DFO, has taken that away from us. Because over the years, when modernization came in, because I was born and raised with no water, no running anything, as modernization came in, A lot of our people got away from that and depended more on, as DFO was taken over, and depending on DFO. But now we're coming back, and that's important that something like this go forward to demonstrate that we can learn and we can manage our own fisheries. We can manage just about everything in our own territories. That's important because one day if we don't, they will take everything away from us. And we got to stop that. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much for those of you online who may not have heard, I think the most important thing here that our elder said was that we have the ability to manage our fisheries. We have the ability to manage pretty much anything. And this whole process is about, it's not a new process, it's not an innovative process, it's an old practice. It's going back to our traditions and doing things the way that we used to do, we originally did. So with that, I don't know where Teresa went. She might have just stepped out to the washroom. So she will be providing a prayer for us for our meal. If you haven't had a chance to register with the ladies at the back for your ticket, which will in turn give you your voting ballot, you can do so now. And if you haven't had a chance to sign up, has everyone signed up on my sign-in sheet up at the front? This isn't for voting, it's for the prizes that I'm about to hand out. So did everyone get a chance to sign it? All right, we're gonna do a random draw. Perfect. Oh, Teresa, we're almost ready for you. You wanna come up and stand with me? Oh, I'll get you one. Oh, and you're signed in. That's for you. All right. So while I'm getting my tickets ready, I will ask Teresa to provide a prayer for us. If you're able to, we would please ask that you stand, and if you could please remove your caps.
Kisok ni gayges kukwalda so tiyak tanel mawiday. Pejaso the madek ni gayok ti jacket kisok away nim tandul makut desno mijip joy which kuwa. Abo komwade jina mokda ebichik tan ikadika na jiska dijik. Wale wade amkoi wade. Abajadi we are guide. Jacket loving his mahidades no git no. Abo we are go to do his cook in Randall. Randall to show the juk. Abo we are gis kogwalalia.
And I'm really honored to have Teresa do that for us because she has been one of the most consistent participants in our lobster discussions for the past 3 years. All right, so I do have some gift cards to give away. I'm gonna pull out some numbers. So Ryan is getting ready for food service. At this point, feel free to head on up to grab some food or to head on to the back to cast your vote. Oh, wanna put your name down, Ronnie? Oh, you're there? Okay. And I will come around and deliver some gift cards. Number 10 is Marilyn Jacques. Come on up.